If there's one game series that I regret never playing until now, it's this one. The E series has been around since 1987, first releasing on the PC 88. I've never heard of the PC 88 until I started researching this. But yeah, it released on the PC 88, and since then, East 1 and East 2 have been ported numerous times. My first encounter with this is the PSP version, which is the one we're going to be talking about today, East Chronicles, East 1 and 2 Chronicles. Now, East 1, honestly, is one of the most difficult games that I've played. And I played a lot of games. And I'm talking about, like, I played Battletoad, I played Ninja Turtles, I like, Dark Souls what? I'm sorry. You Dark Souls fans, you should play this game and then complain. Then tell me how hard that game is. Because while a game like Dark Souls, you go and you look at boss patterns. This one, no. There's no boss patterns to look at. It's just frustration and anger. And this is the first game to ever make me rage. Gonna put that out there. Now, if I laid out the premise to you, and I laid it out like this, a swordsman gets shipwrecked on an island and loses his gear and has to save the island by collecting various items, what game would you think of? If you thought of Zelda Link's Awakening, I mean, I wouldn't blame you, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about East 1. But here's the thing with this game. Even though you're playing as a swordsman, you're not pushing any button to slash at enemies. There's no block button or nothing like that. No, instead, it's using a bump combat system, which is weird to say, but it's basically you're running into enemies to do damage to them. But you have to hit them at certain ways or certain angles, because if you hit them directly on, you're going to take damage, and that's a quick way to die. So the best way to do that is to hit him at an angle, hit him from behind, things like that. And then you're going to see Adol kind of swing his sword as you bump into them. This combat system is interesting. It leads to a lot of deaths, especially as you're getting used to it. And then especially when you're fighting certain bosses, then it just becomes very, very frustrating very quickly. And you got two games like this. Now, as I mentioned before, if there's a game series that I regret not playing earlier, it's this one. I got this game back in 2011 when it first released on PSP. I didn't play them. I didn't play them until last year. Crazy to think about. I've had these games for 13 years at that point when I first played it, and I don't know why I never played them. I really don't. Like, I bought them because they looked interesting. The first one I bought was E7. Didn't play it. Right? Like, I bought it. It looked interesting enough, and then I went and I bought the other ones. I bought East 1 and 2 Chronicles, which was on the PSP. That came as a collector's edition. I bought East and Oath and Felghana, collector's edition. Never played it. I bought East Ark of Napishtim. Never played it. And so, as the games got released more and more, I kept buying them. Like, who does that? Who buys a game that they've never played? Apparently, I do. So finally, I sat down and I played it. And my God. The minute that I turned it on, the music just captivated me. It hit so hard, and it was so fun. The music would just made me want to play the game even more. The gameplay at first took me a little bit. I didn't understand it. It was different. I was like, why I just bump into things? I don't get it. But the more that I played the game, the more I got used to it, and the more I actually enjoyed running into enemies and just like, ha ha ha, I'm killing all of you. It was very different than anything that I've ever played. And then as you go through the game, you collect different items to do different things, like cloak yourself, protect yourself against various dangers. And because of the way that the game progresses with item progression and opening up different areas, it was very reminiscent to Zelda. The entire game reminded me of Zelda, which is it made me love it even more. So not only was the music captivating me, the gameplay eventually grew on me, and then the exploration reminded me of Zelda, and having to upgrade my swords and armor and all of this other stuff to be able to continue to progress. It was so much fun. It hit nostalgia in a way that, like, I haven't been hit before. And it's funny because it's a game that I've never played before, but it felt like a game that I've been playing forever. In this first game, there's not a whole bunch of levels, so you do gain levels, but you only gain up to 10 levels, and that's it. The way that you progress with your stats is mainly on your weapons, so your sword and your shield and your armor. Those are the ways that you progress in this game. But this game does throw you a curveball. And the best way to talk about this is to talk about the story. So now, while I'm not going to go super in depth into this story, I do want to let you know there are going to be some story spoilers. So if you want to play the game for yourself and you don't want to be spoiled for anything, not that this again is not, it's not a crazy story. It's not like there's a big massive twist or anything in this story. But if you just want to experience the story, which is pretty light, um, go ahead and play it for yourself. The game is not long. It's about a 9 to 10 hour game on your first playthrough, and then subsequent playthroughs are a lot faster. I'm able to beat this game in like 3 to 4 hours easy in one sitting, which is it's reminiscent to me of a Resident Evil game or an early Zelda game, so I really appreciate that. So as that all goes on, his adventure from shipwrecking onto this new land that he's never heard of before, he goes and he has to collect the books of Ys in order to save this land from this unknown evil force that's taking over. Monsters are run rampant, and in order to progress, he has to contact different people in different towns, which there's not that many towns, and they will go ahead and lead him to where these books are found. As you collect the different books of Ys, you encounter different bosses, and again, the bosses don't really have that much of an impact in the story itself until you get to like the final boss. And as you go through each different area and you speak to the different NPCs, they start telling you little tidbits of information that you actually use for later on that's going to help you on your adventure. So as you progress, you find a town that all of a sudden they start saying that some monsters are stealing all of their silver. All of their silver is disappearing. Why is all of their silver disappearing? Well, as you go and you start fighting the different bosses, you find a boss that is weak to silver. So you have to go and get a silver sword to be able to beat him, or you do no damage to him. I can't tell you how much this boss frustrated me. This is a bat boss, and he just it was an omen for things to come, because this boss took me 2 days to beat it because I kept dying over and over and over until I realized that I need a silver sword to be able to kill him. So I got the silver sword, and all of a sudden I'm doing massive damage to this boss, and he dies really quickly. So, okay, no problem. I go and keep going through the game, and I get upgrades to my weapons. I get the final sword in the game, and I go and I make it to the final boss, which is in the Dark Tower, and the final boss is named Dark Fact. I don't know why they decided to name the boss Dark Fact. It's a weird name for a boss, but the boss's name is Dark Fact. And as you're fighting Dark Fact, and you're all fully equipped, and you have the best gear and the final sword and all that stuff, guess what? You don't do any damage. Or you do, but it's very little. And this boss is super frustrating because the boss not only shoots a whole bunch of projectiles at you as he moves on this very small platform, but the platform starts to disappear under you. So not only are you dodging these projectiles that's coming at you, but then you can essentially have the floor ripped out from under you and you fall and die instantly. It's a very frustrating fight, and the fact that you do no damage or very little damage to this boss is even more frustrating, until you realize that all the silver was disappearing because Dark Fact was the one that was ordering all the monsters to get rid of all the silver. Why? Because he's weak to silver. So you went and got the best sword in the game, but you have to use a prior weapon that you completely forgot about at this point to go and beat this boss. So once you equip the silver sword and you start attacking the boss again and bumping into him, you start doing more damage to him. Not a lot, but you start doing more damage than you were before, which is very helpful. But again, you have to dodge all of this stuff that is going on, and this is the fight that made me rage. I've never raged ever in my entire gaming career, and this is the moment that it did it. And you know what? I love this fight. I love it because not only was it frustratingly difficult, but when I beat it, I felt so empowered. I felt so like I actually did something in my life. Like it was I accomplished something because the fight was so difficult and so fast paced, and I just loved it. I loved it, and it set the tone for what was going to be the rest of the series for me. Now, as you were adventuring through this game, you were collecting the East books. Unfortunately, you didn't get the last East book because Dark Fact had the last East book. But once you finally beat him, Adol collects the last East book and goes on his next adventure. After beating Dark Fact, all the monsters disappear from the land. Adol collapses from exhaustion, and he's surrounded by a white light, and the game ends. Yeah, that's how it ends. It ends on a cliffhanger because you're supposed to play East 2 immediately after, which we'll talk about in a different video because as the East series goes on, the games change with how they handle combat, with how they do a lot of different things. And I don't want to put all of them together into one video because that's ridiculous. But this game, honestly, I was very glad to play it. It felt more like a prologue than a part one, and that's because when they originally made these games, they made them one right after the other for the first two games. So East 1 and then East 2 came out a year later, and you're intended to play them relatively quickly between the two because they share a lot of similarities and because the story continues from there. This game introduces Dogi, who is one of Adol's best friends and a common reoccurring character. Unfortunately, you don't get to play as him. You don't get to play as him until an entry much later in the series, which is fine because this game's supposed to introduce Adol. I keep saying it's switching between Adol and Adol. I don't know why I do that, but this game is supposed to introduce Adol as the main protagonist and set him up as the adventurer that he is to become further down the line. But honestly, like the way that this game sets everything up and the way that it plays, it really sets the bar high for me for what's going to come in the rest of the series. And honestly, I'm not entirely sure if the rest of the series can live up to that because the bar is set really high with this game. And it's unfortunate that this series isn't as well known as I would like it to be, and as I'm sure as well known as Falcom would like it to be. But more people who play these games, the more that we'll get of these games. I hope, I think that's my logic anyways. And currently there are 11 games in the series, with the 10th game just being released. I know, backwards, but East Origins is technically a prequel, and East 10 is the newest entry in the series as of this video. So yeah, there's 11 games, 10 mainline, well, they're all mainline entries, but you get what I'm saying, like 10 numbered games. And anytime somebody asks me where they should start when it comes to the East games, start here. Start at the first one, because if you're going to start at the newest one and go backwards, you might not like the gameplay from the original game. And then on top of that, the games, as they progress, they build on one another with the gameplay, and they evolve with gameplay. So I highly recommend people to play this one if they're going to start on it. And this one, I mean, you can find it on Steam. Other than the PSP version, it hasn't gotten a port on any modern console, which is a shame. Maybe they'll fix that, they'll change that, hopefully. I mean, they did say they're porting more of their games, so let's see what happens. As I said, when it comes to this first entry, there's not a whole bunch of story to discuss, and there's not really that much to discuss because it's such a short entry, other than just repeating that the music was fantastic. When I say it's fantastic, oh my god, this music is great. You've been hearing this music throughout this entire video. You cannot tell me that it is not fantastic. And honestly, that continues on as we get to the other games. So I'm very glad about that, and I'm excited to see what each entry has going forward. Now, as of this video, I haven't finished playing every single game, but we are going to play every single game. So I hope you stick around for that, and that way we can experience this together. I thank you for watching, and if you played East 1, let me know what you think down below. Let me know if you experienced the same thing I did. Oh, by the way, not to mention, there are different difficulties, and I played this on normal difficulty, and yes, it made me rage on normal. There's a nightmare difficulty. There's a hard mode and a nightmare difficulty, and that scares me. So thank you for watching, and I will see you guys on the next one.